Men rising up to end the silence around us about the chains that bind us, to dispel the darkness of illusion with luminous spiritual technologies, to finally become the hero within us all. This is Arise the Honest Man's podcast, episode 51, our penultimate episode of the year. And we are deeply enlivened and grateful to have these most esteemed guests with us, Guru Carana Padma Devi, as well as Kripamoya Prabhu. And they are joining us now for episode 9, or let's say the 9th installment of our Conscious Relationships series. And it's really funny. You know, we are not the number one Hare Krishna podcast in the world. We know who that belongs to. But you know, actually, Kripamoya Prabhu and Mother Guru, they are currently in the house of our dear friend and brother Namras Prabhu. You know, their daughter is Tulsi, who's married to Namras, and then of course her lovely sister Janavi also. So anyway, we're so fortunate to have you. As Jai was saying, this is going to be you're definitely the most senior couple we've featured so far for our Conscious Relationship series. Somehow or other we've only, I think Mukunda and Madhurika were like the oldest couple, and they're like 40 somethings. So yeah, we're just incredibly enlivened at the prospect of, you know, soaking up your wisdom, as Jai says. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us and availing yourselves.
We feel so honored that you asked us. For us to feel confident to you know, be on your podcast, because we know you hit to the core of the issues.
we promise not to ask anything controversial for this episode. We just want your wisdom for how to have a successful relationship, as is common knowledge now in our community. A huge percentage of our devotees don't survive their marriages. And so the idea is, so why talk about that? Let's highlight the successes and what principles were applied for them to be successful. And you guys, I don't know, how long have you guys been married for?
Next year will be 40 years.
Whoa, that's inconceivable for our generation. So far, all of the guests we've had on it have been 10 or 12 years, which is itself inconceivable for our generation. So 40 years is like mind-boggling. And yeah, we want to hear what makes it possible, what makes it successful, and in that way give hope and encouragement and enlightenment to the next generation of devotees coming up. So that's the purpose of this podcast, is not to get too crazy or controversial or anything funny like that. So just be peaceful.
I'm so curious to begin at the point where, you know, because in the early days of the movement, like, we've certainly heard some very interesting stories of how, you know, couples got together where, like, you know, like someone was flown out to a different continent to go and marry someone that they've never met, you know, and like all kinds of really interesting stories. So I'm super curious just to hear, going back right to the beginning, how did the two of you actually get together, and what was your journey of courtship like?
Shall I begin?
Well, ladies first, as we say.
I say ours was an arranged marriage, meaning I arranged it. I was a Sankirtan devotee at the time on the ladies' Sankirtan party, and so I was, you know, by Krishna's mercy, I was, you know, well, it was very enlivened and very successful, and so I could have the pick of anybody I wanted if they would agree. But my authority at the time, you know, said, you know, who would you like to marry? And I said, oh, I noticed that brahmachari, you know, he sings very nicely. Amazing kirtans. That's the thing, led amazing kirtans. He had just come back from Africa. He was doing some preaching work there. And so, yeah, he had come back to England from Africa to do some collection. And so Shiva Ram Maharaj, who was our Sankirtan leader at the time, called him up and said, hey, Kripa, you want to get married? And what did you say?
I said, no.
No.
I took it as an accusation.
Oh wow.
I was a very strict, self-respecting, saffron-clad monk, and someone asking you if you wanted to get married is an accusation that you're hiding.
Right.
But
so
but the seed was planted, and so it took some time, but in the end, he agreed to it, and we had probably 6 months of courtship. That means, I think you used to come over to the ladies' ashram house, and I used to make you fruit salad or something. And sometimes we would go out on Sankirtan together. That was our, kind of courting. But yeah, after 6 months, we decided to go for it. And I mean, there were a lot of things going on at the time around, in the yatra politically and all that, which I guess we kind of bonded over different things that were happening as well. But one interesting thing was we had our astrology done, because that was kind of the practice then, to get your compatibility done. And it came back really good. And, I, of course, was quite attached. But then we looked at the, what he had put in, the date, and he had actually got the date wrong.
This was after
We had been, kind of associating or, courting for like 6 months. And, we were kind of right committed to it. So we sent it back, and it came back really bad. Like we were only like 20% compatible, which is a fact. We are not very compatible at a material level. But, we just decided to go for it. And so we did. So, if that question will come up, or, about compatibility, astrology, and all that kind of thing, we've managed to put Krishna in the center and kind of work through that, find the areas which are compatible. And we have some areas that are compatible. 20%.
20%.
I focus on those.
Oh man, I'd love to get to that. But I'm just curious to unpack this process of in our devotional community we have this term when prospective husband and wife are getting to know each other of like we're associating now. So I'm just interested, like that 6 months that you were sort of checking it out, associating, the courtship phase, like what shape would your associating actually take? I mean, how much time did you actually get to spend together, and how would you spend that time? What was your, you could say, bonding mediums or methods?
This is a good question, because in our generation, associating has all sorts of money implications versus what we might hear from you. So this is a nice question.
Can I go? Yeah. Thank you. Did you notice that?
I did. We noted.
That's the secret of a happy marriage.
He's only doing it for the camera.
Oh my God, you guys are so funny.
Well, it was most unscientific, really. I mean, we, as devotees, we talk about that we have a culture based on the Vedas. And Vedas have a very scientific way of developing a relationship, and the codes of etiquette that go on to begin it and maintain it. Hardly any of which were existing sort of at that time. Even when we did get married, I had to resurrect the Vedic wedding ceremony because no one knew how to do one. Other than burning some wood vaguely in the middle of a square. So we had to do some research. But really developing a relationship was, there were political needs at the time, financial needs at the time. We were ashram people. And so we had a spiritual leadership crisis at the time, which meant that we had a financial crisis, which meant that we were the solution to the financial crisis. And that meant 3 years from the time we first met until maybe 3 years after we got married, we were raising funds. So our association was raising funds together.
Or separately. We were separated. Actually, after we got married, we were actually separated for a great deal of time, raising funds.
Wow.
The idea was you should come together, but not too much. Get to know each other, but not too much. Associate, but don't get attached. It was almost a sort of a incompatible request, I think.
Mm-hmm. We did go. I remember once we went to see ET together.
Well, that's like highly.
Our date, we felt quite guilty for it.
That required.
When it first came up.
That required, hours and hours of penitent prayer after that. That was. We thought we'd really lost our Krishna consciousness at that point, But it was snowing outside, and it was snowing outside, and we were desperately cold, trudging through the snow to try to sell paintings to raise funds to keep the electricity switched on. So we had a mad moment of,
But can I just say that having those periods of, obviously during the courting period, we were meeting somewhat regularly, but just, as I said, I used to make a fruit salad, or occasionally we would go out collecting together as well. But after we got married, we had these periods of separation. And I think from my experience, I would say within a healthy relationship, it brought us closer together, because having those periods of separation, and then once I had the children, you used to go to India sometimes, or you went to Hungary, we had, and even now, sometimes he stays out in the garden in a cabin. Just having sometimes some space and some period of separation has helped. I think it's helped our relationship to, be healthy.
Do you know the British expression? It was very Jane Austen.
No.
Very, very Jane Austen means that a prospective husband and a prospective wife, they communicate through gestures and tickets and fan movements and little courtesies and etiquettes, and it's not meant for exploring the more physically intimate side of life, because if you do that, then it's not possible to make a cool decision. So in the beginning, you're meant to getting to know the person means getting to know their values and what life with them would involve, what they may like, and then the rest can come later, and can legitimately only come later. And perhaps that's the defining difference between the last generation and this generation.
Yes, I definitely got some questions on that.
We see today, but we'll get to that, I'm sure.
I have just hearing your relationship, and this is one of our standard questions because I just find it interesting. It says in the West, they marry the girl that they love, but in the East, they love the girl that they marry.
Yeah.
And I guess this is to express a difference between like a love orientation versus like a duty orientation towards relationship. And from what you've described just now to us in this process of courtship and marriage, it sounds like very much the latter, like a duty orientation. And, some affection is there also, but largely duty informed versus love informed. So I kind of was interested to hear about that dynamic, not only in your own relationship, but as a metaphysical approach to relationship also. Which one is like most important, or for you specifically, but in principle also? How does that work out or play out, or should play out?
Should I go? Well, when I first met the devotees, I was 17. I had no girlfriend, no sexual experiences, no intimate exchanges, no love. And so my inner core was just a celibate student committed to God realization. From 17, I had been raised with the notion that living with a woman was in some sense a second-rate way of life. The best way of life was the celibate male. And I was a monk for 8 years, and the thought of marriage never crossed my mind. And the thought of love never crossed my mind, because I looked at it philosophically and I tried to understand things that I'd been taught, that love of God is the goal of life and anything else just gets in the way. So why become entangled in something that just would get in my way of the ultimate goal? So when I did realize, and it comes with the speed of a steam train, you may not be a monk for the rest of your life. You have to very quickly understand that there's a change of value is required. But even then, marriage was uppermost, and love was maybe it will come, maybe it won't. So there's liking a person, but falling in love. If I had waited until I fell in love with my dear wife, I might have been waiting 10, 15 years. That comes later. I think I'm living proof that love does arrive eventually. It's something that you have to wait for. And then when it comes, it takes the relationship onto a new level. But if you demand, I must love this person, or this person must love me completely, and then we make a commitment to each other, then you may be disappointed. Sometimes it comes like that. In a few rare cases, as love. I have heard of couples who love at first sight. They met very, very early on. But I mean, I've done weddings for others, so I know people's backstories. I mean, I'm a priest, so I've done 575 weddings to date.
Wow.
So I always ask the couple, how did you meet? And very rarely they say, oh, we just instantly hit it off.
Sure.
It's work and it's duty, which seems very unspontaneous for us in the West. We want the gratification of romance. We want the gratification of deep love. We want the gratification of undying commitment as a prerequisite. So like we want them to show me your QR code of deep commitment, your double vaccination of deep romantic love, and then we will let you in the door of marriage. It's not like that. For most people, it's not like that. So I think we have to peel back the layers of Western appreciation or Western expectations that this is how you form a relationship. And we may get some of the reality of the situation.
I mean, we have not the opportunity, but we often get approached by couples who are struggling and looking for counsel and advice. And sometimes there are couples who did come together out of love, and it's just kind of degenerated into like they can't stand each other. So these are people that actually came together, chose each other as life partners, and then the relationship after some time just dwindled terribly. I mean, I don't know if I was attached, but I don't know if we loved each other. I think definitely love grows. I think we all need help to maybe find, in the days where there was limited choice, so somebody who wasn't couldn't kirtan lead or gave a class of us naturally. But we needed help. We needed help from our elders, to help to make it happen.
With Hare Krishna couples is a very, very small gene pool.
Yeah, it is.
Very small. You're
Yeah.
swimming in a very small pool, you know.
Yeah, and then you
Yeah.
can't really associate, what you can't really take the time, or it's not proper to get to know, which I really admire of the younger generation. They're much more natural with each other within their relationships, which has its plus side and also maybe some negative aspects to it. That maybe it's a little too free and easy sometimes, but I do admire that they have those opportunities to maybe get to know each other a little bit, within, kirtan events or this or that, bus tours and all that. I think my own son met his fiance on a European bus tour.
Yes, he did. I remember that.
So that it's like an opportunity to naturally kind of develop an attraction.
I want to say something.
Yeah.
I was thinking that, normally people look upon this word austerity as a bad word. But austerity or tapasya is actually the keynote element in any ashram. It's more evident in the brahmachari ashram. But as soon as the brahmachari ashram comes to an end, some men lay aside this commitment to austerity, not realizing that austerity is equally required in the grihastha ashram. It's not a life of unlimited pizza parties and enjoyment and beards. It's there's on the austerity is that the relationship is overlain with the austerity of duty. So it means that you're engaged in a relationship of love, yes, but a relationship of where you're both serving this a higher concept together. You're striving for self-realization together. Now, in the old days, I would have laughed at the idea that a man could be living with a woman for many years and still be striving for self-realization. The idea is that if you're really striving for self-realization, don't live with the opposite sex. Obviously, that's incompatible. But having done it, I can tell you that if you do it properly, there's an equal amount of austerity in the brahmachari ashram as in the grihastha ashram. All the ashrams have to have austerity as an element. It's just where you choose to fight your battles and how you fight.
Sure. I must admit, as I'm hearing you both express these notions, which in relation to absolute truth are self-evidently true, I must say that the stark, like, I cannot actually describe in words how stark the contrast is with. I work full time as a relationship therapist, but like in the secular world, right?
Yeah.
So like I deal with people in the secular world that are very much, conducting these Kali Yuga kind of relationship dynamics, and it's just everything that you're saying is like, yes, this is true, but for the absolute vast majority of people out there, there's just no way that they're ever going to be able to live in this way, let alone like understand it, because it's just so far removed from people's frame of reference. And it's like, for me, it's a very interesting thing, because I have to help people like from where they're at, right? Like I've got to take where they're at and help them from there. But then, so that's kind of like one extreme. And then you could say like the notions that you're sharing here is largely the other extreme, which the two of you have successfully embodied and practiced, for the most part. So now I'm kind of thinking like, you get like the kind of like modern Western approach or like way of approaching relationships where, Prabhu described it so humorously, there has to be this full, like deep-seated, full-hearted loving sentiment, and you just have to be completely bonkers about the other person, and only then. But so I'm kind of thinking like, that's one extreme, you're the other extreme. Now, like the young generation, like the current generation of young people who are just getting married or about to get married or have just gotten married, like to me, they're kind of like something in between, because they are conditioned by these Western ways of being on the one hand, because it's been all around them, but on the other hand, they also hold like our values, our Hare Krishna values, of being married and being together for the sake of reaching enlightenment together. So I kind of feel like they're somewhere in the middle. And having dealt with a lot of younger couples and helping a lot of people, like, where would you say in terms of courtship today, like where is really the balance? Because these kind of like Western conditionings are very real, and a lot of people just can't live on this level of austerity, and this level of like strictness and sobriety. It's just not viable for a lot of the young generation. So how are they supposed to find the balance and not like, you know what I mean?
Right.
Well, one thing is that I know a lot of young couples, they're very busy doing this and that, their podcasts and their work and their whatever their hobbies are. But I think, you have to invest in the relationship. And it is hard. Like for us as devotees, we've got our spiritual practice, which is, takes a good deal of time a day. And we have our, the work that we do. We have children. I mean, our children are grown up, but they still take some time, believe me. But then where's the time for us? So, I mean, we haven't always been successful, but we do encourage others, as we have tried ourselves, to see that our relationship is part of our work, part of our service, and we have to invest in that. And we have to bring some fun into that, some joy, some love. Whatever it is, whatever turns you on. We've tried to kind of go on dates together.
Nice.
When we were younger, and we had the support of we didn't really have family support, but we had very close friends that supported us in caring for the kids, so we could actually go away together. And we do encourage others to do that as well, because otherwise, everything can so quickly fall apart, because every individual just follows their passions and their own needs, and doesn't see the importance of really putting that time into the relationship. It's hard work sometimes. It is hard work. But they say, just the hard work smooths our rough edges and makes us better individually and together. So yeah, but definitely it's harder if you don't put that time into the relationship. Yeah.
There's an interesting symbolism that I often quote to married couples at the time of their wedding, and it's that the white cloth and the red cloth which drape the bride and groom are tied. The cloth is tied between them, and I joke with them that this is tying the knot. But these two cloths together form a knot, and the knot has its own existence. That represents Vishnu, and your commitment of marriage is to Vishnu, and therefore you serving your marriage is a commitment to Vishnu. So it's not just serving each other, but there's a third principle in the marriage, and that is your commitment. Your commitment, her commitment to him, and his commitment to her, and your commitment both to each other forms a triangle. And the apex of that triangle is the Lord. And therefore, it is a religious duty to spend time with each other, maintaining the relationship. Not letting, but many people don't do the relationship maintenance. It's like having a vehicle, but never putting water, never putting oil, you would not be able to drive that vehicle for very long. So if the marriage is the vehicle that takes you through life, you have to maintain it. How often does it take to be maintained? Well, there's strategies for that. There's a lot of good books written on the subject, but marriage maintenance is almost as important, if not more important, than marriage preparation.
Yeah.
One thing we didn't talk about was the area of preparation where you talk about sort of covert values as well as overt values, the things that really make you, and this can be brought out by, there's a few tests of 100 or so questions each that you can ask each other. There are many different versions of these, but to get to know each other is very important. Simple things like, when we are married, who will do the washing up? When we are married, who will look after the children? When we are married, will we live in the city or in the country?
Right.
These are things which the prospective partner may not reveal to you unless you ask the question. So when you are obliged to sit down and ask these questions, you will know a heck of a lot more about the other person. Then you decide whether it's right and proper and fitting for you at that moment to become romantic, to allow yourself to fall in love with that person. Because if you fall in love, love will come and go. But if you have the values connected, then love will endure, because love has a habit of changing character as it goes. I always tell people there's 4 different types of love. One is the craving love, which in our devotee community we would call lust. Old-fashioned biblical term, lust. That's easy. And a young man and a young woman are infinitely compatible on that level. Especially if the man has been celibate and the woman has been abstinent. They are very, very they're absolutely meant for each other at that point in time.
So
wait.
So really,
that's craving love. Where's the other
That's
3?
craving love. The other is commitment love. Actually, the next one is companionship love. They all begin with C. This is a tool I use. Companionship means we will work together. It's from an Italian word, compani, with bread. We will eat together. We will do things together. It's no longer an I, but it's a we. We're on this together. We're on this journey together. We will ride together. We will go and do what we're meant to do. We're having the same goal. Next comes commitment love. That even though you may get old, I'm making a commitment. So the craving love may have disappeared, but the commitment love has to replace it. And then finally comes the caring love. That no matter what you look like, even when you're old, because one of your questions was people are shocked by what comes after the romance is over. So people have to be told. Yeah, right. So people have to be told that these shocks will come. Your wife before she has children and your wife after she has children are two different species of human life. You can't even recognize them. And that can hit a man very hard, you see, speaking as a man. Hit a man very hard, because the woman that you gave your life to, the woman that you made your commitment to, she now belongs to someone else. She now belongs totally to another human being who is about this size. So it can lead a man to become very jealous of his own children. And there begins, this. So unless you talk about it, unless you know that you have to make a transition from craving love to commitment and companionship and care, then you may miss the point. And it will change. And our relationship has changed over 40 years.
Yeah.
Is there any craving left?
Those are exactly the kind of uncomfortable questions that Mother Guru didn't want to hear.
Well, look, let me tell you. This is Bodhika. These are the questions that we ask.
Oh, Prabhu, you've understood.
I mean, I came from a community and family where there was no question of, divorce or, there was no question of it. So when I got married, I never thought it was an option. But there were a lot of marriages in the past within our society, ISKCON society, that failed, and there were a lot of casualties from that. And we see that it is our duty and our commitment to our gurus and our community to stay together just for the stability of when couples are undergoing some difficulties and we're trying to counsel, as you probably know, we try to help them to see the worst alternative of their choices if they choose to separate. I mean, obviously, unless there's abuse, that's a different question. But just so many young couples today just are so easily want to just throw the towel in, and they just don't have that sense of duty or commitment or responsibility to the communities in which they live. It has an unfathomable ripple effect, within our communities when these relationships break down.
Absolutely. You guys kind of already touched on this or in some ways answered it, but I'm going to ask this anyway. I think the love approach versus duty approach gives a different set of expectations. When you're in the love sort of approach to a relationship, the expectations are, as one can imagine, they mimic what we see in our culture, whether in music videos or and so on, Netflix and whatever. Versus when you have a duty approach, then the expectations are probably going to be a lot more sober. You're able to embrace the idea of like austerity and sacrifice, and because the approach is very different. And then you're going to talk about your values in order to help you have reasonable expectations. But yeah, my question is, what is a reasonable expectation? Because at least what I've seen, I'm not in a relationship. I've never been in a relationship, but I get to hear about everyone's relationship because I'm not in a relationship. And a lot of people confide in me, just to talk about how they're struggling or suffering. And a lot of times when I've heard that, it seems like there were unreasonable expectations or just not knowing what to actually expect in a relationship. So and therefore like a clash between what they expected and the actual reality. So I'm curious about your experience of that. I mean, because your approach was a lot more duty oriented, and so I imagine there was less of a schism between expectation and reality. But I don't know, maybe there was that experience also. And how does one navigate that experience? Because it seems like at least part of the reason why a lot of our relationships are failing in our community is because there's contact with that schism. Oh, this is not what I expected. And then people throw in the towel. So how does one expertly or more skillfully navigate the disorienting experience of an expectation not meeting reality?
Let me say something. I think expectation is created. We may have had less of an expectation because we were the first generation. I knew very few people who were devotees of Krishna and married. So there wasn't the previous generation to talk to.
Right.
There wasn't anybody to consult. And we were on our own. But I think the younger generation now, as you say, that they've been given two expectations. One is by outside culture, one is by inside culture. And this is where it gets a little bit controversial, because I think that outside culture has given the expectation that it'll be fast and furious, but it may not last. And our internal culture is very heavily imprinted with the template of sannyas and renunciation as being the highest possible human achievement. And I think that to have a next generation of successful married couples, we may have to revise that a little in sending out very positive messages, creating expectations that it is possible to have a fulfilling, spiritually oriented life as a married person. Because if the outside environment is telling people that you'll enjoy it for a while and then you'll suffer, and the internal environment is telling people you'll enjoy life for a while but then you'll suffer and then you'll become detached. I mean, I have known wedding ceremonies where a sannyasi will give a hard-hitting message about the frailty of married life.
Okay.
And what sort of a beginning to a married life is that for any young couple? So I think within our own culture, we have to, A, create healthy expectations by good training. B, support our young couples where they go through difficulties and not jump in and say, aha, we told you, married life is a hotbed of suffering. You should have known that. The hard knot of material attachment, because that gives no one anywhere to go. We have to provide them with positive role models that they can work to emulate.
Yeah, and many men, for instance, may read things in our scriptures, and misinterpret them, in terms of, how they should treat the wife, or. But I think training, as you say, is key. But one thing also that which I find really valuable, and I share with so many young couples, even though this is our closest, most intimate relationship, that it shouldn't be a place that we just dump on each other. We have to really, so important to have. Like, I really value my relationship with my sisters, my friends, my close friends. We have a little community of close. I call them my sisters, because we're so close. We share a lot, and we complain a lot about this and that. It goes on, and for the men as well. I mean, it's much easier for ladies to do that than for men. I mean, you're creating an environment where men, which I really value, that where men can talk about issues openly, and I think that's absolutely wonderful. But I think it's so important that we don't just have each other, but that we actually take advantage of the friends and community around us for support. Because otherwise, if it's just the two of us, I know sometimes
it's already incompatible.
Yeah.
I understand that the Western idea is that when male and female come together, it makes a sort of yin and yang, and it makes a whole. I feel whole. Now I've met you.
That's right.
You are my everything. You are my best friend. Which creates a problem in the first place. The way people interact as husband and wife creates a problem. Even sleeping in a double bed creates a problem. The auras mix and become very similar, so people lose attraction because they're no longer different. They are subtly resemble each other too much. So separation actually keeps the marriage stronger. Whereas often the idea is that, he's sleeping on the couch downstairs, she's sleeping upstairs. Oh, what's wrong with the marriage?
You're giving all our secrets away now.
But Janaki Pandit said a man should spend. Janaki Pandit's not the greatest marriage counselor. He had a difficult time in marriage. But he said a man should spend 2 months of the year in total in separate from his wife to keep the relationship fresh. Whereas in the West, we would say, oh, so much time a man is spending away from his wife, obviously they're going to fall out of love. Well, if you're relying on that craving love to be the glue that sticks you together, then you will have a problem. But if you rely on the separation building the ultimate commitment, then you have a more solid.
Yeah, I remember when I grilled Namras before he married Tulsi, and I was, talking to him about this kind of idea, and He came up with it himself. Yet I'm not expecting her to be the fulfill, like to make my relation, to make me, 100% the better person. That he understood that. That we have to look to other relationships around us to enrich the relationship we have. If we have that, I know I was talking to one couple, and everybody respected the particular, man, when he was out and about doing this and that and his work. But at home, he was just nasty and horrible. And it was almost like he didn't have a place to actually release particular emotions. So he just did it within the home. Whereas if he would have had a vehicle by which he could do that, then his home life would have been much more peaceful. So I think it's really, really important.
Prabhu, a little bit earlier, you were, pointing out how it's a massive challenge for a man when so there's the saying that like women get married thinking that men will change, and men get married thinking that women won't change, but they do. So like at this sorry, at this juncture, when the children come, I'm very, very curious to hear of your experience, and you've raised such incredible people, and but I'm so curious about that initial experience. Why it's interesting. No, Prabhu, I mean, because I can imagine it was a heavy thing for you. It was a heavy thing for you at the time, that shift.
Well, I think that we're very selfish creatures, and to say that in the beginning of in my married life, I saw the opportunity to deal with my cravings, and that was the relationship. That it was an important part of the relationship, but that objectifies the other person into a fulfiller of your physical expectations, which doesn't deal really with the transit that is inevitably going to take place. So the transit, the emotional arc that we follow in life is that if you're fruitful and you have children, the wife's body will no longer be meeting your expectations of physical demands, which are in themselves very self-centered, very me-orientated. But rather, it gives birth to a child whose every need is provided by this huge hormonal factory which your wife's body has become. So the beautiful form that you got married to has now become a form for feeding children.
You're like looking at Mother Guru like, is it okay? Can I continue?
I'm just saying that's it. That's the, well, my expectation was that you would carry on being this person for me, and now you're being this person for others. And I think that can be a point in a man's life, especially if there's one child, two children. In our case, two children relatively close together. It may there's an absolute demand to change relationships. So that transition, I would say men need help at that point in their life. I saw my father really needed help in that place. I see other couples that we talk to, they need help at that point. It's a difficult point. The other point is the unfulfilled emotional, physical, and financial stuff, which we call midlife crisis, which comes after the shock of discovering that your wife's body is meant for the children, which is a different other point in the transit. And then another point is sort of in the late 50s, maybe late 50s, where really whatever it is that you are in your late 50s, unless you're a really late developer, that's who you are. That's who you've become. And at that point, you can turn inwards on yourself and you can think, well, you know, she's to blame for me not being everything I could have been. And she may look at her husband, the woman may look at the husband and say, well, I could have been so much, were it not for you. So these are key weak points, I would say, in a relationship that have to be the key areas of turbulence, where you have to strap yourself into your seat, you know, tighten up your seatbelt. Don't get up to go to the restroom. Don't do anything.
I think you're speaking from a man's perspective.
Sure.
Definitely.
Right. We want to hear.
I know.
We wanna hear your
Definitely,
perspective.
I'm hearing this, and it's very interesting. But I think that's definitely. I mean, I think for a woman, it's very fulfilling. But in terms of expectations, I would say, I know you talked about kind of the, you know, the timeline of, you know, or different aspects of different periods in a relationship. But one thing about expectations is we do expect our husband or partner to be just absolutely everything. I gave up asking him to do DIY a long time ago because I realized that's not.
They may not say the
Oh,
same thing.
DIY. Do you call it DIY?
Yeah. Do it yourself. Yes.
Yeah,
Like being handy around the house. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
That's my
Yeah.
response when she asks me to do DIY. Do it yourself.
But yeah, you know, it's like we want our husband to be, you know, to be there to do this, that, and the other, and you kind of fall into roles. But I mean, I just, it's a difficult thing, but we really do have to honor with each other the things that we're good at doing. And so in each relationship, it may be different. You know, in some relationships, the man might do the cooking, but you know, it's having unreal expectations and honoring the things. I know he's a brilliant writer, he's a brilliant speaker. So let me allow him the space to do that. It is frustrating and you do nag them a bit, but you know, you just have to come to that place of peace and just see for the higher good, you know, that you know, you kind of manage to make things work and you fall into the roles that you do.
Okay, we want to know how. I really want to know this. Oh, sorry. I really.
Yeah. Okay. Go.
Okay, you go. You go. It's
No,
related to the
I
children
mean,
thing.
I'm just yes. I'm just distilling things and like, or digesting and it seems to me like really, I mean, Prabhu, you were also speaking about this a lot, is like very, very clearly communicated expectations, both on like principles and details, both on like covert and overt values, like knowing that life on a practical level is very, very demanding and you need to have the conversations about how you're going to navigate it. And like, you know, you're saying you've got these key areas of turbulence, and basically the way to deal with it is to know that it's coming.
Yeah.
And to know what you're in for, and then to be somehow or other prepared and equipped to deal with it for what it is when it does come. That's just what I'm taking away, and I just want to reflect that back.
Yeah, no, you understood that. I mean, you understand this anyway, but it's getting it over to young couples that they may not be that different from the last generation. The whole thing of postmodernism is that everybody feels that they're different from their parents' generation.
Yeah.
Right.
When really they're pretty much the same, but without the training that goes with it. The best solution for all marital problems is to speak to someone who has been married for a long time. Some of it is very simple. Is it Krishna conscious? It doesn't have to be Krishna conscious. Does it come from the Vedas? It doesn't have to come from the Vedas. It's just common sense. Common sense.
Bring it back. Please bring it back.
It's like, you know, the difficulty I feel with some of us, at least, is that in order to take up spiritual life seriously, we sort of said goodbye to our families. We said goodbye to parents and grandparents' generation because we saw them, we viewed them as hopelessly unskilled in the business of what we saw then as the goal of life, which was the spiritual emancipation.
Right.
However, some of the granny wisdom, and I use that term advisedly, the granny wisdom we missed out on. I remember Jayadvaita Swami told me, he said the best thing, he said, that ISKCON can do is bring back grannies.
Yeah, I
We
heard
just
that.
don't have an older generation to sort of say, you don't want to do that. Don't do it that way. If you say that, she'll say this, and then no, don't do this. Do this. But part of this generational sort of schism that's taken place has rendered us without the wise counsel of elders. And then we created, so that's in postmodern culture. And then from that postmodern culture, we created another organization which would in effect doubly do that by insulating people from any good advice, because it's something unwanted from people who don't know what our goals are.
Also, some people don't want the good advice, actually. I find that they're like, a lot of young couples are like, no, we don't need any help. We can actually do it on our own. We can work it out on our own.
Don't speak about counseling.
Yeah, counseling or mediation. You got
They don't want our advice, but then our advice is, well, if you don't take our advice,
Google.
Go to go to a trained counselor or a therapist to help you deal with your childhood issues, perhaps, that you're now mentally projecting onto your relationship. And they don't want to go, no, it's too, they want to sort it out themselves. But of course you can't heal a broken leg by yourself, and you can't heal a broken relationship by yourself. You need a therapist of some kind. Many couples, they say they don't want to.
Yeah.
They're not interested.
Good luck. I'm curious about the not curious, this is a follow-up with the children question. I think one of the kind of a unique characteristic, I would say, of our generation is we're having less kids. We're not into the kid thing so much. And that's definitely true for the secular world, probably for obvious reasons. But I think our culture, by osmosis, we've also gotten a lot of that, where people are like just not into children. And okay, fine, you're not into children, but they also don't see having children as like the duty, not only to your own relationship, but your duty to the greater community. Like any society that likes itself wants it to continue, which means you got to have children to continue it. So I'm kind of curious about maybe your wisdom or advice about the importance of children, not only to the relationship itself, but also to the greater community that you would hope that you would hope to survive in the future. And how did having children for you all change? Like, how did that change your relationship? That you've already spoken a little bit about that, but maybe a little bit more. And we also want to know, how did you raise such wonderful children like John and V and Tosi? I mean, I'm very close to John and V, and I know Tosi also very well, and I'm in love with both of them. So I want to hear that too. But maybe this first question, just confronting the whole children's question. And
why people don't have children.
Why people? I don't know. I mean, it is hard work. I said to Tulsi the other day, I said, I don't think I'm good. I mean, obviously I've raised three children, but going back to it now, over 60 plus years, it is really, really hard work. She's like, this is my today. But I mean, for us, we had the temple just a mile away. We had lots of friends around.
Did we ever think of not having children?
I mean, I wanted to. Some people don't have a desire so much. I have a strong desire to have children, but what I didn't understand then, what I do understand now, is that how it's this culture of bhakti, Krishna consciousness, going to go on without the next generation.
Right.
It's not. So I mean, I guess mine was a selfish thing. I didn't, when I first joined the temple, I joined the temple and all the ladies wanted to get married, and I'm like, you're all out of it. Like, but years later, I had a strong desire to get married and a very strong desire to have children. I think it's just a natural thing that comes, but for some it doesn't. So, there are some couples, but I do notice that a lot of couples, they have one child, and then I don't know if it's the pace of life, that, and the demands to maintain themselves, or their I don't know what it is, why they just
I'll tell you
can't.
what it is.
I mean, look at the previous generation. Like my mother came from a family of 8 or 9 children, I think. I don't
Yeah,
know
mine
how
too.
yeah, how the capacity of the mothers. I mean,
My mother came from a family of 7.
7, absolutely. And I had 3, and I was like, 3 is a lot more than 2. And we didn't have family, but we had a lot of close friends. And I would definitely say that my children would not be what they were today without the community at Bhaktivedanta Manor in London.
Mm,
Definitely, like, they used to go down there.
Takes a village.
It takes a village. They have so many
absolutely.
aunties and uncles and well wishers, and there was so much opportunity. When it got too much, send them down to the manor. Whether they were in the dramas or cleaning the toilets or helping with this or that. It really took the edge off. I think I know when my family came for Tulsi and Namras's wedding, because a lot of people don't live in kind of big supportive communities. They were
Right.
just overwhelmed to see the support of the community. And I just feel so fortunate that we've had that for our children. And it's hard that I don't know where there's not that many communities here in North America, in England and Europe. There's a few wonderful communities. So I think it is really vital. I mean, it was really vital for us. I can't take all credit for my children. That's for sure. But we did pray very hard, and I know Srila Prabhupada mentions it so many times in the Bhagavatam about really um, praying and having a very very focused meditation when conceiving children. And I would say that we definitely tried to do that and pray for souls who would really you know come into this world as their last life in the material realm. So I don't know if our prayers have been answered, but we feel very blessed and very graced with the wonderful children that we've had. And they're just carrying on from their past lives. They're teaching us now, that's for sure. They are definitely. It's such a what I would say to young couples. It is just the most incredibly um, difficult, but incredibly enriching, enlivening, and educational. I mean, what even little Gorchandra or Chandri, the things he comes out with, the questions he was just asking the other day about death and this and that. I mean, it's actually incredible where these souls are coming from and the depth they have. So,
I think there's um, an anxiety in I was going to say white people, but probably North European people, North American people, maybe white North American people, of just not being sure of reproducing themselves because they're not sure about the culture that they've created for themselves.
Yes, yes.
It's sort of there's a questioning whether you call it, what do you call it, modern terminology, but
White guilt.
white guilt, there's wokeism, there's a paralyzing, there's a paralysis going on within the northern cultures, which makes people very doubtful about the entire culture itself. We're not sure where we're going. We're not sure why we're here. Why would we then reproduce ourselves and further compound the problem? That's one element. Second element is the Industrial Revolution, which has crushed people into cities, whereby to have a house in the city, both the husband and the wife have to work. Third element, sexual liberation of the 1960s, which has made it possible to have sexual enjoyment without reproduction, which is seen to be a liberating factor and is part of the feminist movement. But I was seeing a small part of an interview with Elon Musk,
Yeah.
the most famously rich man in the world. He said, why would you have sex without reproduction? He said, why would we create a whole industry to have sex without reproduction? He just looked at the interview and he says, that's silly. It's just silly. Nature has created sex, the enjoyment of sex, as a sort of counterweight to the responsibilities of having children.
Mm.
Nature itself wants to reproduce itself using
Mm.
Mhm.
Why would you not? He has 8 children. Of course, you may say, well, he's got enough money to. But our parents' generation, our grandparents, my grandfather and his wife, they had 7 children. He was a preacher, a Methodist preacher. They had no money. Just no money.
Yeah, my grandma on my mother's side is one of 14 kids.
Wow.
It's like,
Yeah.
Mm. Prabhu,
Let me say, so that's one part of the question.
right.
And our devotees, our own community, is soaking up on this guilt or this anxiety or this lack of being able to see a future for this culture, with good reason. And they say, well, why would we introduce, so they say, we've got married, but we've decided not to have children. To which my immediate response is, that's not your choice.
Mm.
It's not your choice not to have children. If you wanted not to have children, choose not to have sex. Be celibate, because children are the natural byproduct. But we, in the modern world, we've created this whole vocabulary around. Are you protected? Are you having protected sex?
Oh my
Isn't it? Are you having
Yes.
protected sex? It means that are you having sex where there's absolutely no chance that you'll ever have children? Right? Is it protected? In other words, the great danger that's there for you is if you get pregnant. Or are you practicing safe sex? In other words, safe sex is where there's no children. Unsafe sex is where there's a possibility of children. I mean, so we've created a vocabulary since the 1967 probably, whereby we've placed having children into a category of leading a dangerous life. So
Wow.
people get it the wrong way around. So there is a certain courtship. Okay, we've done that. Then there is a commitment of marriage, and you stay married because only through marriage and creating that bond will you provide a safe space. That's safe sex. Safe sex is being married and then having children. And if, as literature says, the demigods are queuing up to take birth in this movement, then for God's sake, let them through.
Oh, touche. Well said. Yeah, I'm so curious about this. Because we've certainly seen that many of the first generation born from Prabhupada disciples went through like very, very adverse childhood experiences and were kind of like traumatized in different ways. And it was almost like some of our core philosophical notions, especially concerning renunciation and, like the heaviness on women in the Shastras that, that was blown out of proportion and whatever, pile all the kids into Gurukul, you have preaching, Sankirtan responsibilities. Point is, like, lots of those first generation kids grew up being highly traumatized individuals, and you know, it's just rough reality to face. But you know, we look at your kids who, you know, and Jai knows them personally. I haven't had the fortune of meeting them personally yet, but who are incredibly like well balanced individuals seemingly. And so I'm very curious. I mean, Mother Guru has expressed like her very natural desire to have kids, and Prabhu, I mean, I assume that it was an agreed thing. You decided to do it together, but from like,
Yeah,
but
I had a hand in it.
but you know, it's you know, I'm just thinking like in the context, like in the social milieu of like the those like very early days where, you know, there was a very kind of like hardline mentality, you know, around renunciation. It's almost like you kind of like begrudgingly get married and have kids and have the whole thing. I'm curious, as a young man, as a young father, Prabhu, like when Janavi is the oldest, right?
Yeah.
So when Janavi arrived, like as a young dad, what was your kind of like internal dialogue around, like, how did you articulate your responsibility as a father? What did you regard your primary duties as a father as being, and how did you consciously go about your fatherhood?
Do you remember? I sometimes that happens when you you know, you can't remember because you were there, and something that
Right.
happens, and you're dealing with a whole bag of emotions that erupt at that time. I do have diaries written about.
Yeah, I do think that you had a commitment because your own father had, you know, left you at a young age. I think you definitely had a commitment to be there for your children,
Breaking the cycle.
to break the cycle. And I think it was a role that it took some time, you know, because at the beginning, of course, children are, you know, prone, you know, they're being nourished and fed by the mother. So I think, you know, it took time for you to fill the shoes, but yeah, I think it was very natural for you, and I always admired your that commitment and love and wisdom. And we gave the children, we really tried to give the children a very broad, you know, experience of life, you know, both religiously, philosophically, culturally. You know, we both came from different backgrounds, which we, you know, was very much a part of their upbringing, as well as obviously the Krishna element. But yeah, we did a lot of traveling together. We had a lot of very rich experiences, which we shared as a family. And I think consciously
I think
we
that
tried
was the
to.
main.
I mean, knowing that other generation where, you know, it's something we never really ever considered to send our children away, or yeah, as things happened in the early days, unfortunately, it was very unfortunate.
My thought about that was that you know, Prabhupada had seen high-class British families send their children to, you know, very upmarket boarding schools in Darjeeling, away from the heat. It was a high-class thing to send your child to a boarding school, and he may have been influenced by that, seeing that in his youth. I don't know whether he had any contact with boarding schools apart from that. But after we'd seen, my understanding is that Prabhupada changed things every 6 months or so. What we see as the sort of rigid, this is what Prabhupada wanted, is a later construct back projected onto the Prabhupada that really existed, which was, okay, that's not worked. From now on, we do this. Every 6 months, we were getting letters that says, no, we shall try this from now on. We shall do this. This is not working. Let's do it this way.
Sharing that.
So Prabhupada was very flexible, and there were a few things that were experimentation. I believe the Gurukul system was one of those experiments.
Well, that
not the content,
not the
but the boarding element of it.
Yeah, and the fact that the teachers were not qualified, they had no qualification or no experience. When our children began school, I got involved myself because I just wanted to ensure that they were going to have, loving
Nice.
experiences as children. And so I got involved from the beginning. Johnny started school, and I carried on really until just last year. Involved in children's education to try and change that.
So that's a 25-year commitment.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Children's education was born from the fact that we don't want this to happen to our
We don't
children.
want this to happen.
Wow.
That sort of shaped it.
Wow.
But going back to that question you asked, what a young father felt like. Well, I had no one to talk to. My father was gone. My grandfather was gone. The senior devotee generation was largely either there or not there, but there was no one I could go to. One or two maybe, but we had to find I had to find my own way. And I think that was a hard part. But it's part of being a pioneer in a social spiritual movement like ours. You may not have the generational transmission of knowledge, of accumulated wisdom. And but one thing we did find out, as we're saying, is that there's a lot of research being done on how children grow up healthily in a community, and the community is, sociologists have said it's 148 people to be precise, all different tasks. That's the fundamental unit.
Wow.
And concentric circles of different people at different levels of, connection to the child. And it just, we had that by default, because when I first became a devotee, I said, where's the Hare Krishna movement? They said, we are creating it.
Wow.
We've got this big house given to us by George Harrison, in which there was 20 people. And they said, but we're starting the movement now. So you're part of the movement. You're creating the movement. So in my head, as a young man, there wasn't a Hare Krishna movement to take advantage of, or to really join. There's a few people, or there wasn't really a Hare Krishna movement to blame when things were wrong.
Right.
I was the Hare Krishna movement, or I was responsible for creating it. So I've been as much a part of the later experiments in creating what we need for the next generation. So, for instance, I've written a book on the guru and disciple, because I saw that there was misconceptions in that area. I've also written a book based on questions that young couples have asked me, called for 100 autumns. That's the marriage contract, that our marriage will last for 100 autumns. So that's based on conversations with young couples.
Wow.
So my business has been to sort of help create some of the infrastructure, some of the systems, as much as it's been hers to create pretty much an educational system, so that our children would grow up in the movement that we would like them to grow up in. And a big part of that has been helping them to find fun in spiritual life through theater, music, drama, to not artificially increase the level of renunciation or discipline or austerity, but for children to find. There's one thing we attempted to do in the past, I feel, was to give children an adult level of spiritual discipline.
Wow. Right.
And rather than an age appropriate, engagement.
Yeah.
And so their raising up in Krishna consciousness has always been that, music is fun, dance is fun, theater is fun, games are fun. What else? Cooking is fun.
Yeah, but
all these
also
different elements.
Also to give them, educational qualification, and so that they can also contribute to the world in whatever way. It could be spiritually through helping people through meditation, or it could be through, being a lawyer or whatever, not the lawyers, but like making a contribution to society, whereas before it was
Right.
like, okay, we're not, a lot of young Gurukul children felt that they didn't get a proper education.
Right.
They came out of Gurukul with no skills.
Because all the good people are in here,
Yeah,
and all the bad people are out
that's
there,
right. It was
Right.
all armies and this and that.
which is not the reality of the situation. And as soon as they're old enough to understand that that's not true, everything that you've ever taught them, everything that you've ever taught them is highly suspect.
Right. Right. This is a weird. I'm only thinking of this question now because I want to respect your time. I think you have to go soon, but I'm 40 years is an epic for our generation, and it's an amazing achievement, honestly. And I'm kind of just wanting to hear like your own appreciation of the other after watching and being with each other and watching each other for 40 years. And I'm sure there's been tons of issues and so on, but you've given us a lot of wisdom on how to navigate that. You've given us at least a lot of tools how to navigate that. And I don't know, it's just coming in my heart to ask that. I'm touched hearing from both of you. It's coming in my heart to ask this, like, what are some of the kind of core appreciations after 40 years together, which is an amazing achievement.
Can I just say, well, before we begin that, I spoke to George Harrison's wife. I said, "You're married for a long time." She said, "Yes, it's easy to stay married for a long time." I said, "What's the secret?" She said, "Just don't get divorced."
Wow.
Oh.
But anyway, yeah.
Well, I really appreciate that my husband only spends money on books. He's not a spender. He lets me manage the finance, and he only spends money on books, which, how can I complain if he spends money on books? So, because some men, they just whittle away, they're just free and easy with money and all that, or maybe some women are as well. But I appreciate that. I appreciate my husband's honesty. He's a very honest, really honest person. Like, he never even likes to return something to a shop because he feels like it's like, I bought it. So he's just like a totally has so much integrity and honesty. The integrity really I appreciate, and obviously, as you've heard today, his ability to deeply reflect on issues in a very balanced way. But I think I can also say, because we have this conception of like Vedic wife or whatever, and I feel like I have very happily, for the most part, served my husband in whichever ways we're cooking and other things, but he's also allowed me to fulfill my own kind of ambitions and do the things that I wanted to do. He's never held me back really from pursuing the things that I wanted to do. And I really honor and appreciate that you allowed me. We did work together for many years, doing congregational preaching work and ministering to the community, and we still do that. But he allowed me to kind of sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't work. Sometimes couples work well together. So yeah, I think he allowed me to have my own journey, also as part of ours. And I mean, we've had quite an adventure together, I think, haven't we? Over the 40 years.
40 years of fun.
Yeah.
Haribol.
We can say that now. Because we're getting near the end.
I would say that my wife has always found something of value in me. Has always been the encourager, always been the inspiration, and a very hard worker as well. Very hard worker. She's more determined than I am. If we do create a goal together, her determination will see it through to the end. So I'm very appreciative of that. And she's been very principled and moral and virtuous, and always has an opinion.
It's important, but it's okay.
Oh man.
which I'm always eager to hear. She keeps me on the straight and narrow.
Jai. Well, for the sake of your time, we'll let you go. We know you have some other engagements. This has been an absolutely beautiful, enlightening experience. And Matt was expressing on Facebook, thank you for the gift of this conversation. Indeed, you have given us a great gift with your wisdom and your realization. Real Vigyan, and we're very, very grateful for that. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for all that you're doing, because I think you are creating a space for really amazingly necessary conversations within our community of devotees. And all glories to your service.
Jai. Thank you, Mata.
You for having us.
Thank you.
All right, Hare Krishna, everyone. We're well. Let's just quickly say, on Sunday at 1:30 EST, we will be having our final episode of the year, entitled 108 Shades of Grey. A little bit earlier. A little bit earlier this year, we conducted some research pertaining to the sexual values of committed couples in our society and where people are really at, as we've sensed a widespread societal melees in that regard. So we're going to be sharing our findings. We will be joined by Danya Rico, as well as Brajananda and Kumari, another young couple who assisted us in this endeavor. So tune in for that, 1:30 EST. That's just afternoon on Sunday, right here on Boudica.
A topic we didn't quite explore, but we will tune in.
Let the young couple discuss that.
All right, Hare Krishna, everyone.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Hare Krishna.
Jai.